Hello everyone, we are today here with Francis Pulham, who wrote the T-34 shock, and he will show us how to operate a T-34 in the winter.
So operating T-34 in the winter is exactly the same as you'd operate in the summer, but there are some minor caveats, mostly due to the weather conditions and the ground conditions. So in the Soviet Union, you can have winters which go as cold as 40 degrees Celsius. So we're talking incredibly cold. And on the flip side of that, you get summers that can get to 40 degrees plus. So all vehicles and all uniforms for their soldiers all had to cope with all this weather. And with T-34, there's basically three major things that they put on the tank that enabled it to operate more effectively in the winter. And the first thing is the air start for the tank. So inside the hole here, right in the nose, there are two canisters of compressed air. These canisters of compressed air are used to force the frozen fuel into the system and force the engine to turn over. So normally it's an electrical start. It's got an electrical starter motor, which is started by the driver. But when it's so cold that even the diesel starts to freeze, it's a great big grab handle between his legs that he pulls back, which releases the air and forces the engine to turn over.
So how much was there more or less in these canisters? Was it 1 use or 10 use more or less?
As far as I'm aware, it was as many uses as you had in there. So you pulled it back for as long as it took the engine to turn over, then you returned it to stop the airflow again. I believe it was two 80-litre air canisters. So it's quite a lot of air.
Okay. So then the other thing is, of course, with the tracks. So
absolutely. So if we go around this side of the vehicle. So T-34 track in general is better in icy conditions than on dry conditions. People who drive these tanks regularly will describe how driving on grass, they're very slippy. The track doesn't grip the ground very well. However, in frost and hard ground, the track is incredibly strong. However, even in icy, wintry conditions, you still need that little bit extra grip on the ground. So all Soviet T-34s from the beginning of production were issued with things like this. This is an ice cleat. It is a simple cast toothed device that you bolt to about 1 in every 3 or 4 track links. So if you look on the track of the T-34, you'll notice that you've got male and female links, so with teeth and without the teeth. And the track links without teeth have got 2 holes. And they marry up perfectly with the ice cleats. And in the track toolbox, which is at the rear of the tank, you have the pins that attach these ice cleats to the track.
So basically you would move another one like here or here or here?
Yeah, exactly. So there isn't enough ice cleats to put on every single link. It works out to be about 1 in every 3 or every 4. So you'd have, like you say, 1 on this one, not on this one or this one, but maybe 1 on this one or this one. You'd have the engine running as you did it, because you need to move the tank backwards to get all the links on the underside as well.
Okay, perfect. And the final part is at the rear of the vehicle, and we are very lucky with this one, because as you told me before, you can see these 3 welding points, or
yes,
however you want to call them.
They were originally hard points on this particular T-34 that they attached a winter stove. So in the all Soviet T-34s from the end of 1942 to the end of the war were given hard points on the rear engine deck to have a wood heated stove. And the idea being is it keeps the crew warm when you're at the rest, when you're relaxing. It stays on the tank, and there's a tarp that you essentially create a small tent with at the back of the vehicle, and it keeps the crew warm at night. Instead of having to camp under canvas at -40, which is not a good idea, you've now given the crew something warm, a heater to keep them going at night. So that's less of a vehicle running in winter, that's more of a crew ergonomic thing.
One question it comes to mind now. I read a few times that the Germans, when they have problems, when the engine freezed up and everything, that they put like some container with fuel in it, made a fire and put it under the engine or something to warm it up. Was this also done by the Soviets?
Absolutely, yeah. In extreme cold temperatures, it was actually the first thing that the manual states is build a fire underneath the engine. If you can't get it to work with the fire underneath the engine, that's when you use your compressed air. You kind of don't want to completely empty those canisters too quickly. So like you say, just like the Germans, they'd build a small fire, place it underneath the engine, let it warm up a little bit. Hopefully the diesel and in some cases petrol engines will defrost.
The next part is covered by Peter Samsonov, the author of designing the T-34. This is an outtake about the T-34's performance from his video Tanks in Snow, which covers various other tanks as well. Be sure to check out the full video. Thanks to Peter for providing this video.
You've probably read about this, but generally whenever it's mentioned, it's generalized to, all German tanks had bad mobility in snow, all Soviet tanks had good mobility in snow. A bit of a kernel of truth to all this, and it is demonstrated, best of all, by the T-34. Thanks to its wide tracks, you can see here, and powerful engine, it did have pretty good mobility in snow. This was established starting all the way in the trials of the A-34, the prototype for the T-34. So these prototypes were finished in very early 1940, and as you can imagine, it snows quite a bit in the USSR in the winter, even in the southern bits. So they were tested in snow. Trials held in February, these were some of the very first outings of these brand new tanks, revealed that the A-34 could drive pretty effortlessly with 1 meter of snow cover, so snowbanks 1 meter deep, which was a pretty impressive feat. But turns out that wasn't the limit. In March of 1940, A-34 prototypes were taken on more thorough trials, and it turns out that they could drive with up to 1.8 meters of snow, so nearly 2 meters of snow. It didn't save, the documents didn't specify if they couldn't drive in deeper, it's just they couldn't find any deeper snow than that. And it wasn't just flat terrain that the A-34 could negotiate. It could also negotiate slopes with up to 1.5 meters of snow cover. Again, these are not man-made obstacles. They had to deal with whatever terrain was available for trials, but A-34 back then could effortlessly handle anything that was thrown at it. There were trials held in March, the long-distance drive from Kharkov to Moscow that you're probably well aware of if you've read my book. These trials were held over very snowy conditions as well. The highway that the tank drove on was covered in up to half a meter of snow, but that was not a problem for the T-34. In 1942, there were some very interesting trials held that actually compared a lot of tanks. So there were 3 man-made packed snow walls up 1.7 meters tall built. And this was a pretty effective obstacle. Even you don't think that snow can really stop a tank, but a 1.7 meter tall snow wall was actually pretty useful. Not against the T-34. The T-34 punched through these obstacles in 10 seconds. So 3 pretty large packed snow walls, 10 seconds, not a problem. As you can see, that white tracks and a powerful engine are indeed very useful things when you want good mobility in winter.
Francis, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
And thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye.